Guys, so today's video is reviewing a case from Time of Crime channel on YouTube. It was posted December 2023.
And allow her to go out. Crystal would come to her window and they would talk. On that day, they decided to take their bikes and go to the park, which was only a few hundred yards from their homes. They often went there since the park was very close and it had a long bike trail. Despite their age, parents weren't afraid to let their daughters go there because both girls knew the area well, and serious crimes in the town were extremely rare.
Bruh, I am not letting my child under the age of... I would say honestly, I know this is gonna sound crazy, but 14. I would not let my child under the age of 14 go alone. And I know that parents are just gonna be like, that's crazy. But okay, then maybe 12. Under 12, it's just so sad and scary, but they had each other. But look what happens because, oh my gosh, they don't make it.
To let their daughters go there because both girls knew the area well, and serious crimes in the town were extremely rare. The girls left around 3 p.m. and were supposed to be back for dinner. However, as time passed, their parents started worrying. Around 6 a.m., as the first light of day began to break, Laura's grandfather suddenly heard a cry and rushed in that direction. He stumbled upon Laura's father, who was in shock and claimed to have found the bodies of Laura and Crystal. They lay off the bike path amidst thick undergrowth. Laura's father immediately realized that both girls were dead.
Now, later in this case, we're going to learn that the police end up interrogating this dad, and for 20 hours they're keeping him in this confession room. He doesn't ask for a lawyer, which if you're being interviewed by the police, you ask for a lawyer. And he ends up confessing to this crime. He was not the murderer. He had a false confession as far as this case goes, because a man later on, his DNA is found on the girls and he confesses to killing them. So I'm literally shocked because the dad gets involved as far as he is out there looking for them. Of course he is. He's been in and out of jail. He has a bad rap as far as his criminal history, so the police want to pin it on him, it almost seems like. But he's the one that finds the girls, because of course he's out there looking. What else could he do? Any real father who truly loves their child is going to be out there looking until they're found.
There was a lot of blood and injuries on them. The man called the police, and they arrived promptly. After examining the bodies, forensic experts determined that the cause of the girls' deaths was multiple stab wounds, most likely from a knife. Laura had
I have no words for this planet.
20 such injuries on her body, while Crystal had 11. This news sent shockwaves through the small town. Such crimes were almost unheard of there, but now they were faced with the horrifying reality that an unknown assailant had killed 2 young girls just a few hundred meters from their homes. The police focused all their efforts on finding the culprit. Their initial suspicion fell on Laura's father, Jerry. They were concerned by the fact that he had managed to find the bodies alone after the park had already been searched by officers and volunteers. When the detectives pieced together a coherent narrative, they wrote down this confession for him to sign and asked him to read the text from the paper on camera. His attorney immediately requested a case review, but it was swiftly denied. The prosecution argued that Jerry had confessed voluntarily and affirmed his statement on camera. Nevertheless, after retracting his confession, he had to go through a full-fledged trial with a jury, which prolonged his wait for several years. As for the police officers who coerced Jerry into signing a false confession, none of them faced any consequences. Jerry himself couldn't fully return to a normal life. He began using drugs and was arrested for resisting arrest, subsequently escaping from custody and receiving a 2-year prison sentence.
Poor guy.
He also couldn't reunite with his family and chose to live in Texas. After his release, he gave an interview where he admitted that the coerced confession had irreparably damaged his life. When asked why he had agreed to the confession, he said, "I found my daughter dead. They didn't even need to try to break me. I was already broken." Finally, It's worth adding that the local police and the county prosecutor's office did receive well-deserved criticism from national media and the public. If they hadn't fixated on a single suspect, but instead conducted a thorough investigation, they would have had a much better chance of catching the criminal much earlier. Instead, they inadvertently allowed him to kill one woman and attack 3 more. And these are only the cases we know of.
Seriously.
Its release from prison and the dismissal of all charges. However,
Okay, let's go back.
and male semen found on her clothes and in 3 places on her body. Simple analysis revealed that none of this belonged to Laura's father. It all pointed to a completely different man. This discovery unequivocally indicated that Laura had been sexually assaulted. As for Crystal, they did not find any foreign DNA on her body, but no one doubted that she was killed by the same person. In February 2010, a 26-year-old woman from Arlington exited the metro station and headed towards her boyfriend's home. In the middle of the street, an unknown man approached her, showed a gun, and demanded she get into his car. Despite the assailant grabbing her arm and brandishing a knife, the woman managed to break free. She threw her purse as a distraction
Seriously, good for her.
and fled toward her boyfriend's house. Upon hearing her cries, he and his friends rushed onto the street and called the police. By the time they did, the assailant had already fled. Nevertheless, the woman could provide a detailed description of his appearance. She also remembered the model of his car, a beige Dodge Durango.
Good for her. Wow.
Based on the victim's description, a composite sketch of the suspect was created, and the police began their search. 2 weeks later, on February 27th, 2 women from Arlington were returning home after spending the evening with friends. When they stood at their doorstep, an unknown man approached from behind, brandishing a gun, and demanded their wallets. After the women informed him they had no money, the assailant forced them inside the house and bound their hands. She later regained consciousness in the snow by the side of the road when passers-by found her. She was taken to the hospital, where the police promptly arrived.
This planet is so crazy and scary. But okay.
The woman provided them with a description of the attacker and mentioned the model of his car, a beige Dodge Durango.
Oh my gosh.
Remarkably, just 2 hours before this attack, another woman had reported to the police. She told them that a man matching the same description and driving the same type of car had approached her on the street. He had attempted to coerce her into his vehicle, but she had used her stun gun on him and managed to escape. Investigators realized that they were dealing with a serial and highly dangerous criminal right in their midst. They focused their efforts on the vehicle, as it was easier to trace through databases. The police visited all owners of such cars, and soon they got lucky. During the inspection of one of these vehicles, they discovered a student ID belonging to the same woman who had been left to die in the snow, along with her earring. Inside the car, they also found the same type of tape used to bind her head and a stun gun. The owner of the car turned out to be a 21-year-old named Jorge Avila Torres, who was serving in the military at the very base where Amanda Snell's body had been found several months earlier, just a few floors below. During the search of his room, investigators found a pistol he had purchased less than a month ago, along with numerous rounds of ammunition. On his computer, they discovered a significant amount of explicit videos depicting violence and cruelty. Some of these videos featured women who were unconscious. Photos of Torres, along with pictures of other men, were shown to all 3 women who had been attacked. They all unanimously identified him. They remembered his face well because during the assaults, he didn't even attempt to conceal it. Following this, Torres was arrested and placed in custody pending trial.
Pretty sad that he didn't want to just live a decent life, have a family, be a grandpa one day. You know, the normal things you do in life. This is really sad. And I won't go down this rabbit hole, but I'm pretty sure violent porn can lead to these types of horrific instances in life where people get so demonically possessed they're out here killing young girls and women.
Investigators suspected him of kidnapping 1 woman and assaulting 2 others, which seemed likely given the evidence. And now, we return to Zion. Several weeks after the sample was added to the database, local investigators got a perfect match between Torres's DNA and the semen samples found on Laura Hobbs's body. What followed was even more astonishing. It turned out that Torres was originally from Zion and was friends with the older brother of the second murdered girl, Crystal. This connection confirmed that both Laura and Crystal knew Torres, a fact corroborated by other kids in the area. At the time of the girls' deaths, Torres was just 16, and the police hadn't considered him a suspect at all. They were
16 when he killed these little girls.
solely focused on Laura's father, who had spent 5 years in jail awaiting trial.
Oh
Once the
my
DNA
gosh.
match was found, Jerry's attorney demanded his client's immediate release and the dropping of all charges. This time the prosecutor couldn't argue against it, as the discovery of Torres's semen on Laura's body eliminated the possibility of her father's involvement. So, they offered him a settlement, which he accepted, receiving nearly $8 million. As for Torres, the legal process in Virginia concluded 4 years after his arrest. He refused to admit guilt, but the jury unanimously found him guilty. He was sentenced to death for Amanda's murder, and for the attempted abduction of 2 other women and the kidnapping of a third, he received 5 life sentences, plus 168 years in prison.
Yikes. Yeah, you cannot let your kids just play outside and go to a park.
Sometimes, when Laura's mom didn't allow her to go out, Crystal would come to her window and they would talk. On that day, they decided to take their bikes and go to the park, which was only a few hundred yards.